is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of DeFi Decoded. I'm Alex Tapscott here with Andrew Young. Bitcoin may be hitting new highs, but for the broader crypto asset ecosystem and frankly for many investors in the space, performance beyond Bitcoin has been kind of uneven. We've seen some large cap names outperform, including many of the larger meme coins. And Solana, I think, is a little ahead, if not sort of flat with Bitcoin over that same period. But there's one notable outlier from the recent rally. That's, of course, Ethereum. And I want to spend some time, Andrew, kind of talking through this because we've been talking about this bearishness in Ethereum for really a better part of a year. And I spent some time over the last couple of weeks doing some research to really suss out, like, are reports of Ethereum's demise accurate? Are they overstated or are they dead wrong? I kind of came down towards the end on that one, thinking basically that a lot of this is not true and that if you look at Ethereum on the fundamentals, it's actually doing really great. But I want to get your point of view as someone who's sort of a market operator who's seeing this stuff and is closer to it. So what do you make of the recent sort of price moves in crypto, the fact that Ethereum, notwithstanding the most recent rally, still, like if you look at the ratio over the last year and a half, it's still pretty much in the dumps here. So what do you make of it?
Yeah, I think there's kind of three core reasons. So the first is the sort of hot ball of money that exists in crypto has clearly shifted to Solana so far in this cycle. And it's created a whole narrative around, Solana being kind of the Ethereum killer. So a lot of people are it's increased a lot of the sort of perceived risk around Ethereum because of that. So that's number one. Number two is, which is probably the biggest, is Ethereum killed something like 90% of its revenue when they pushed the blobs update back in earlier this year. And, a lot of like fundamental driven investors, they just track fee revenue and they're just like, well, fee revenue is down a ton. So, that's very bearish for Ethereum. And then finally, the third piece is, this is maybe the weakest, but it's kind of funny that it seems to line up, which is that typically Bitcoin kind of leads the bull markets. And then you see sort of a shift to altcoins, which includes things like Ethereum. And then finally, there's like a shift near the end of the cycle towards like the smaller and smaller altcoins. I think that argument's the weakest of the three, just because Solana has been doing quite well, and on the very tail end, the meme coins have been doing really well. But
we sort of skipped the quality names in the middle and jumped straight to the meme coins, right?
Yeah, but that's kind of like last cycle. Like last cycle, the Soluna Vax, which was Solana, Luna, and AVAX, all did quite well. And also NFTs, which weren't really tokens, but NFTs were doing quite well as well, throughout the whole cycle. So I just think meme coins are like this cycle's NFTs.
We often look to the history when we're talking about crypto, the election cycle timed with the halving cycle typically precedes the start of a bull market in Bitcoin. Bitcoin usually goes first, and then Ethereum and other names go next. These are things that we look to the past and we see examples of that. And so we're trying to extrapolate, but it's only a few data points. There's nothing that says that it has to work out this way. And, maybe the thesis can play out, but just Ethereum itself can be leapfrogged, because if you look at Solana and others, they are doing pretty well. Now, I think it's also worth pointing out that though Solana has hit an all-time high in the last week, many of the other so-called Ethereum killer alt layer 1 names from the last cycle at least are still way below their all-time highs. And many of the smaller ones that are emerging, I think, are frankly like very small, right, relative to the overall market. So if something with a $5 billion market cap doubles, I mean, that's great and everything, but it's still pretty small potatoes.
Yeah, I think, for sure. It's definitely, Solana is like the outlier, exactly like you said. Like most of the other L1s are all down a ton. A lot of the darlings from the 2021 cycle are actually down 90% plus from their all-time high.
Yeah.
things like Filecoin, Polkadot has sort of recovered a bit, but it's still down 80% plus. So a lot of those, I haven't checked Avalanche recently, but I think it's down 60% plus as well. Which is kind of funny because like in a lot of ways, we always, like, I think even when we were talking about this like 12 months ago, it always seems like the market follows the same cycle, but then in terms of like Bitcoin going first and then like the other stuff following. But when you're actually in the market, you don't know if Ethereum will just keep going down forever against Bitcoin. It's kind of hard to believe in like market history repeating itself when you're actually in the market. I think one thing. Yeah.
Well, no, go ahead because I want to talk about something else. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's one piece. One other thing too is the ETF flows have been relatively disappointing up until the last couple of weeks. That's starting to reverse though. You're more of an expert on that than me. But then the third piece too is the most bullish thing I see by far for Ethereum is the massive growth in L2s. So the amount of L2 users has since 2023, start of 2023, has grown from 400,000 per day to 9.4 million. So it's essentially 25x in the last 2 years and 3x over the last year. So the amount of users on L2s has gone essentially just like up and to the right by a huge margin.
Yeah.
The amount of revenue that Ethereum has actually generated from L2s has gone down 90% because of the sort of the blobs upgrade, which made things cheaper for L2s to post data to. So at its peak, it was at $4 million a day, and it fell all the way down to about 150K in early December this year. But it's actually since 4x from the bottom, from 150K to about 650K, it looks like today.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the amount of users has like tripled. So to me, it's like, there's now, by my count, there's 13 L2s paying more than $1,000 a day in revenue to Ethereum. So this isn't even just, a lot of it's being driven by the surge and growth in Base, which is like the Coinbase L2, which we can also talk about.
Yeah.
But it's also like, it's somewhat distributed as well between, all these different L2s. And my thing is like, would you rather, I own Sol and ETH, but would you rather your revenue come from, it's something like 60% of Solana's revenue comes from Pump.Fun memecoin trading.
Yeah.
Versus, a huge percentage of your revenue coming from like actual businesses in terms of like L2s that have their own, that are actually sustainable.
Yeah, DeFi protocols like Aave, which would be the 8th biggest bank in the United States if you look at their deposits. I
think Solana. I think the narrative is going to shift, and we can also talk. There's a lot of things to talk about this week, but there was kind of like a moment where Pump.Fun has started to get a lot of hate over the last week.
Let's hold the Pump.Fun talk for the time being.
Yeah.
On Ethereum, you mentioned some of the criticisms or reasons why maybe it isn't moving. I've heard a bunch of different criticisms from different people, and my view basically is now that if someone's critiquing Ethereum, then you have to look at what their motives are and what bags they're holding and who they work for, because I think a lot of these are pretty flimsy, right? Like the argument that Ethereum relies too much on layer 2 networks and that somehow the more people are using layer 2 networks which are attached to Ethereum, the worse that is for Ethereum, sounds a little flaky, especially when you consider that the fee revenue has increased so much, as you point out. And then there's the whole thing about how Ethereum is not just decentralized, but it's disorganized, it's disinterested, and adapting to user feedback. It doesn't have the same memes, it doesn't have the same marketing muscle, it doesn't have the same influencers. It's like, well, sure, I think that maybe there could be a clearer message, but that's also a decentralized system. And so you're going to get different points of view of what Ethereum is. And I think that's probably the sign of a healthy ecosystem. And then there's the question about just Ethereum having sort of an identity crisis of its own, right? Like, is it people are trying to glob onto the deflationary money supply thing, or it's the world computer, or it's money, or it's this, or it's that. And I don't know, maybe that's trying to spread yourself too thin in terms of messaging. It reeks maybe of a little bit of desperation that everyone's trying to come up with a new reason to own Ethereum, but it doesn't make any of that stuff any less true. And then, like, if you do the analysis, we looked at the numbers. Ethereum is 55% of the total 110 billion of TVL across the whole ecosystem. Solana is 8%. 52% of the stablecoin supply is on Ethereum. Solana has 2.4%. These are pretty interesting data points. Ethereum generated 58 million in revenue last week, up nearly 20x from the last week of August. So, like, this is not to say this is not a criticism of Solana. I think it's more just like a chill out, slow your roll, like look at the data, look at the utility, look at where everyone's doing stuff, and you'll see that Ethereum is incredibly vibrant. And then the final thing I'll add, which is just like, there's an old expression that you don't get fired for hiring IBM. That was like an expression in like the 60s and 70s, right? If you're like a company and you need a computer system. And in a way, I think a lot of like big enterprises and new users to Web3, new developers to Web3, especially on the corporate side, they won't get fired for building on Ethereum. So that's why PayPal, PYUSD was on Ethereum first. That's why Biddle from BlackRock was on Ethereum first. That's why Santander Bank is on Ethereum first. Like, maybe Solana would be useful, but there's a certain cachet of using a platform that's been around for a while and not necessarily associating yourself with this pump.fun stuff. So I think that just generally, like, if you believe that the incoming administration is going to make it easier for enterprises and institutions to own the asset, to adopt the technology, then they're probably going to adopt Ethereum first. And that's going to be a big driver next year that I think a lot of people aren't really talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think and like another metric too, like stable coins bridge that are on Solana, it's around 5 billion, whereas it's 10 billion across all L2s and 100 billion on Ethereum. Yeah. So it's just like staggering the sort of the growth. So I also think there's going to be an increasing narrative in the back half of this year, which is going to be who's the Solana killer. Like, I think like what's interesting, I think the roles are going to be reversed. In the last 2021 was sort of defined by the rise of Ethereum killers, which was Solana, Avalanche. There was a couple. Those were the two main ones.
Yeah,
I think this cycle is going to be defined by who's going to be the Solana killer, which is going to be like someone competing purely on having the lowest cost chain and kind of competing for that ball of money. I think the ball of money is like the hardest thing to hold on to in crypto. It's just like we've seen time and time again that's like hot ball of money move. What I mean? Like in the last cycle, it was NFTs as well as like crazy DeFi coins. There was also like a lot of activity on Binance Smart Chain, which is now like, it's not gone to zero, but it's fallen quite a bit. Like a lot of the activity right now is on Solana meme coins. But
can I ask a question on that? Like naively, Binance Smart Chain, has seen a decline. Why is BNB worth like $100 billion?
BNB, yeah. The thing with BNB is that its value is sort of also tethered by the fact that the centralized exchange. There's a lot of
like sort of like the share float of the company of Binance, right? Like they don't have they've just
I don't love it.
Corp.
It's kind of I personally don't like those types of tokens that are attached to centralized businesses. I think the token is effectively subordinate to the actual equity of the company, which is just never. BNB is a little bit different. Like, it's actually one of the main reasons I didn't invest in FTT token in the last cycle.
Yeah,
was that
that makes one of us.
Yeah, I hated the setup of having this token that was, fully subordinate to the actual equity in the company. I just thought that was like a very kind of a shady business model. Token like BNB is a bit different though, because BNB is actually used as gas token for the BNB chain, which is actually a huge blockchain, like one of the top 5 in the world. But then it's also got this weird tether to the actual exchange itself.
Yeah.
So they kind of both feed value. I think a lot of the value is driven by the exchange side, like the fact that they pass back revenue from the exchange to the token. But to me, that's a very kind of iffy setup. But in any event, I just think the hot ball of money is just constantly looking for new games to play, right? Like, and so, and the thing with the meme coins is, so part of it's driven by the ultra low cost of Solana. that's kind of obvious. The second aspect was Pump.Fun, built this like breakout new consumer app to like make it really easy to launch tokens. And then the third aspect is Phantom Wallet, which was initially a Solana native wallet. Has by far the best UX of all the different crypto wallets. And I think all three are in the early stages of starting to reverse a little bit in terms of being benefits for Solana. So first is there's starting to be more and more mindshare for these other L1s. Sui is like the new one that everyone's sort of starting to promote a lot. Who knows if that will actually catch on? I think the bigger threat is actually Base. Base, which is the L2 of Coinbase, is growing tremendously right now. And interestingly enough, Phantom Wallet just announced support for it as well. So that makes it way easier for any of these Solana native kind of guys to now use apps on Base. And then finally, I know we'll save it for sort of later in the show, but Pump.Fun's been getting a lot of hate in the last couple of days. A lot of it I think will blow over, but there's definitely sentiment's definitely starting to turn a little bit. I think overall, I think Solana is still going to be the main winner in this market, just because Sol is the main casino chip for the hot ball of money this cycle. But I think it's going to, because like if you want to buy meme coins, you have to buy Sol. You know what I mean? Like when I bridged some ETH over to buy some meme coins on Solana, and I had to literally sell ETH into Sol to then use it to buy meme coins. So there's just a constant buying demand there. But I think longer term, the narrative I think is going to switch at some point to sort of Solana killers. But anyways, I've been talking for a lot. What do you think?
No. I mean, it's all great stuff. Like I think that the Solana story is good. I do worry. Obviously, the meme coin thing is just troubling. But Solana's got an $80 billion market cap or $90 billion market cap, which seems like a lot, but it isn't relative to Ethereum where it was at the peak or even where it is today. And, I think just we've talked about this more holistically in the past about there's demand for block space, different blockchains have different functionality, different communities, different assets. So there's probably room for them all to do well. How big should they get? How much should they be worth? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but the higher Bitcoin gets, the higher the possibilities in your own mind get to like where you can anchor the value of these things. So if like Bitcoin's 1.5 trillion, it's like, well, why can't Solana be 300 billion, right? From where it is today. So I think that's a big part of it as well. Aptos, Sui, Monad, Barachain, all these things, Tia, Celestia, modularity. This is like what the new stuff everyone's talking about. That was a bit of a grab bag of words, but basically there's a ton of new protocols. Do you have any strong view on any of them right now?
Yeah, I think Celestia is somewhat interesting because it can kind of compete with Ethereum on data availability, the data availability side. So it can actually sort of suck some of that data availability revenue that L2s would pay to Ethereum to actually pay it straight to them. Arbitrum as well has their own data availability sort of thing set up. So I think that part's kind of interesting. It's a little bit of a risk, I guess, in some respects. Though I think most L2s, like the main benefit of being an Ethereum L2 is to essentially have like a provably safe bridge. So I'm not sure if it will sort of eat at some of the revenue and eat at some of the margins of Ethereum, but it doesn't kill the sort of fundamental use case of building an L2. Mm-hmm. The like Aptos, Sui, all that stuff. I am no longer. I've retired as a quote unquote trench warrior in terms of chasing the hot ball of money. I am now officially a crypto boomer. I just like to buy the blue chip stuff.
You're hanging them up.
So I'm not the guy to ask in terms of like where is the hot ball of money going to go next. I'm not actually the right guy for it. I'm a huge believer in Base. I think Base has huge distribution. It's easy to use, very fast chain. A lot of benefits. It's like incredibly easy to bridge to through Coinbase. So I think Base is like one of the most interesting ecosystems to deploy on. So like speaking as an app developer, I'm excited about Base. Yeah, I mean, there's the thing with the Sui Aptos. There's also Say. There's a ton. I think Monad is really interesting as well. It's kind of like an EVM Solana is the way to think about it. So it's like 10,000 transactions per second, super fast, super scalable. That's probably going to be one of the more interesting launches and definitely one of the ones that we're looking to deploy on for SX. And then Berachain is a bit different, but it's sort of, I would say it's more unique. It's like DeFi. It's almost like a chain that's building the hot ball of money into the chain layer itself, which is kind of awesome. It's pretty awesome, actually. Then they've also built a great community. So, I'm pretty excited about Berachain, but like in a different way, not from like So I think those are like the three that are like the most interesting, I guess, to me.
Cool. Well, we'll see where it goes. Okay, let's turn back to Solana because Solana pumped and it was fun, and then it was not fun because there was some news out of this thing called pump.fun. So, like, basically, I mean, I'll probably butcher it, but essentially, it's a platform that allows anybody to launch a meme coin. These are things that like expressly have no value or utility, but they can catch on and become really valuable over time, right? And there were people launching all sorts of sort of off-color, funny, irreverent things, and then invariably, there's going to be some people who launch some stuff that is harmful or offensive, like Nazi propaganda, things like that. So that's very bad. And now it's gotten kind of almost worse, where people are on these live streams, basically, threatening to like hurt themselves or other people or humiliate themselves in grotesque ways unless coins go up in value. And that's sort of crossed the Rubicon for a lot of people, where it's like, okay, this is, however you feel about meme coins, is getting a little too icky. And, look, this kind of thing has always existed in the corners of the internet and in society, but now there's a way to monetize it, right? And that's sort of this troubling new sort of convergence, I guess, it's happening. You got this coin that allows you to try and monetize this sort of dark, disgusting side of the internet, and it's leading to like this outcome, which everyone thinks and kind of agrees is probably not that great. So, is that a fair assessment of like what's going on?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of describing it. Essentially, they launched the live streaming aspect kind of a couple weeks ago, and over the last week, the amount of sort of quote unquote devs, which is creators of coins, the amount of devs that started live streaming went up 100x in 1 week. And exactly like you said, tokens started getting created purely around the live streaming feature. And like there was some crazy ones like, this guy was like, I'm going to sit on a toilet until the market cap hits 50 million. I think he's currently still on the toilet. It's been like 5 days. Like there's some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I think someone killed a chicken or something and say, I don't know. I didn't really follow it, but so like it created this huge backlash in the crypto community. I would say on Sunday night was kind of when it all came to head. And then Monday, which was, yesterday, they announced that the live stream aspect they were pausing it, and they had to hire a ton of new sort of mods and stuff. Pump.fun last week apparently made $100 million in fees in 1 week.
That's crazy. They're going to need it.
Yeah. So
there's going to be a lot of backlash perhaps to this.
Yeah. The thing with these meme coins though, like people have to realize, like, there's, if you go on the Pump.fun leaderboard, there's a couple that have now reached over $1 billion. I think actually maybe just Peanut the Squirrel, which is kind of a funny one, as $1 billion, as well as this other one, Goatsy, which is like an AI meme coin.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of these coins die. And when they die, anyone who invested in them loses all their money.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Pump.fun's extracting a ton of revenue, $100 million a week from this like hot ball of money.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Solana has this like, there's a lot of like front running of transactions and stuff when you trade on Solana. So you often you often end up paying like a 1 or 2% slippage when you're actually trading these meme coins in size, or else your transaction fails tons and tons of times. And so the MEV bots, which are essentially just like also printing money from this hot ball of money. So the moral of the story is like this is like fundamentally unsustainable. There's massively net value destruction, or like at least money is shifting from the hot ball of money to a couple of key players, which is the founders of Pump.Fun and these MEV bots. So at a certain point, the hot ball of money leaves, and the fees that have been extracted by the Pump.Fun people get sold into the market, and that's when you get the like reverse of the flywheel effect.
Yeah,
I don't know if we're there yet, but it does seem like we're getting close, because at least in terms of the craziness on Pump.Fun, it sort of definitively has peaked, because nothing could have been crazier than the last week when people were literally exactly like you said, like
peaked for now. I mean, who knows, right?
But it can't possibly be as crazy, because there's now, when they relaunch the live streaming feature, there's going to be tons of content moderation now.
Right.
So, and that's good. I mean, that's obviously more sustainable and less potential for like.
I guess if by crazy you mean like depraved, then it won't get more depraved. But crazy could mean like with content moderation and some rules of the road, could actually get more activity even than before, and lead to like more insane, pumps and dumps and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think partly, but it does seem like it's going to be one of those things where there's going to be less and less like attention generating crazy events. It's going to I don't know. I could be wrong. You know what I mean? I've also been fading the meme coin stuff for the last 4 or 5 months and been wrong there. So, but I do think I don't know. In terms of like, I think they have to not shut it down, but lock things down a little bit, because at a certain point, they're also just going to be getting way too much attraction from regulators. Like, for example, there's a lot of kids streaming on Pump.Fun's live streaming thing. And so there's a lot of talk about how there's, and the company's also based in UK, which has even more stringent, like child protection sort of laws on the books. And so I think like there's going to be a lot more sort of self-regulation on the Pump.Fun side, and probably as well on just like meme coin side as well. So just because like it's just getting too big, it's going to attract too much attention. So I mean, we'll see.
We'll see. Never a dull moment.
Yeah. More of the story though is I do think. I mean, I'm willing to die on this hill as an ETH Maxi. I think ETH is like the most undervalued it will be at least for the next 12 months. Like not in terms of, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but like I think sentiment on ETH is at the lowest it's been, even though the fundamentals, in my opinion, have never been stronger, at least on like a long-term basis.
Yeah.
And so
I think it's like what will be the major source of market cap creation and value creation in the next year in Web3. And, so because it's like 350, 400 billion, right? So if it goes to $1 trillion, it's only quote unquote tripled, but it's unlocked tons of value. Like it's grown the whole space so much. And so I think that's like, to me, that's sort of, I think Ethereum will take its rightful place as, one of the big two again, which is what it was back in the day.
Do you, have you been following the sort of Michael Saylor stuff as well? Or do you have any opinion on that?
I actually don't really have an opinion on it, other than I'm interested in the market behavior. I think that there are a lot of people who are looking for vehicles, ways to get exposure to this asset class. I think that there's historically been a real gap between the demand and what's available. So people try to buy things that are sort of inexact proxies. These days with the Bitcoin ETF, if you're looking for just straight Bitcoin, there are lots of options, which is why the premium is curious to me, right? Like, so that people are spending $2-3 per $1 of Bitcoin on this particular vehicle. But I think it's emblematic of just a wall of demand. from TradFi investors who want to get exposure to the space. So I think, for issuers and for people who are thinking about doing creative stuff, like it's a pretty bullish signal.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting that the premium to NAV is so high, right? Like, to me, that's almost the most, I think people are going to look back and be like, this is the thing that is the most important metric to watch for this bull market. Because the higher the premium, the more incentive there is for MicroStrategy to do more of these like ATM, at the market sort of equity offerings, debt offerings, I guess.
So it's an interesting, Sorry.
And one thing I didn't realize is like the sort of like one of the arbitrages that Saylor is doing is that there's no real clean way for debt capital market participants to sort of participate in crypto.
Right.
And so like these MicroStrategy converts are in a way, they have like a monopoly for like, debt-based investors to sort of participate in the crypto rally. And so when
that's a bit of analysis that I haven't really thought through that much. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because that is the interesting sort of like arbitrage that actually makes sense to me. I mean, you could also buy like Coinbase bonds and stuff like that, but that makes sense as like part of the reason for why there's so much demand for this thing. I mean, also a lot of it, like the retail community is like fallen in love with MicroStrategy. And so there's a huge retail MicroStrategy meme stock following as well. But the thing is like the higher this premium, the more debt he's going to issue, the more Bitcoin he's going to buy, which is then going to drive up the price of Bitcoin, which is then going to make the stock of MicroStrategy go up. Like, I feel like I've seen this story before with Luna. I mean, it's more stable than Luna, but I guess, am I wrong on that? Or like, I think it's going to work in the short term.
Which is that I'm pretty sure. So on the way up, it has that flywheel effect. And the question is, will it have that flywheel effect on the way down, right? And I don't think so, because, maybe we should bring on someone who's more of an expert on this, but there's nothing that's like, this is permanent capital. This is a corporation that bought Bitcoin and holds it on balance sheet. And they have debt, but it's convertible debt that can convert to stock. So at no point do they need to be sellers of their Bitcoin in order to pay down loans that they've taken on. And at no point will they face redemptions in the same way that like a fund might. So it's very possible that, not very possible, one possibility is that it goes on like this for a long time, that eventually the market taps out of demand for converts and new equity. And then maybe that coincides with some shock and Bitcoin goes down. And so the premium, they start to lose the premium. And then people start to sell the stock. So something like that could happen. Interestingly, last week, Citroen, that I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, the hedge fund, that's like a popular short account on Twitter, basically said, we love Bitcoin, but we think this thing is overvalued. I'm sure even management agrees. And MicroStrategy was down, I think, like 20% in a day. And Bitcoin barely budged. Now it's down now, so I don't know if those two things have any relationship to one another. But at least in the moment, I thought that was kind of telling that the stock got whacked, but the underlying asset kind of hung in. I don't know. There's something there to be untangled a little bit. But I think, is there a possibility that this is Grayscale 2.0 and that this is GBTC and it went from like GBTC at a 50%, never at a 4x premium, but at like a 50% premium. And then it went to a big discount. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely people getting blown out on pair trades also, right? Like they're shorting MicroStrategy stock and then going long spot Bitcoin and just trying to speculate on this premium collapsing.
They're betting the premium's going to collapse.
Well, I guess theoretically, if he sells enough stock and keeps buying Bitcoin, then the delta should come down as well.
Maybe.
But if Bitcoin keeps going up, then maybe the premium gets crazier. So, I mean, this is like a liquidity dynamic that you got to be pretty deep in the trenches on the sort of TradFi side.
That's sort of my conclusion as well, which is like, it's sort of confusing, but maybe I don't understand it enough. So don't, just be careful stepping into these kinds of things.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a dangerous trade. It's a dangerous pair trade, especially if you don't fully understand the dynamics, because these premiums and discounts, even though on a fundamental basis they they maybe don't make sense. They don't close as fast as you think, and sometimes they widen. Yeah, I mean, in the short term, I think like the premium is still incredibly high, which makes me think there's going to be another announcement any day that he's just sold a ton. He's sold a bunch more of this, a bunch more converts or equity or whatever, and just bought more Bitcoins. Like I feel like that's, the more that this premium is there, the more incentive he has, which is therefore very bullish for crypto. So
yeah,
I
hear you. All right, listen, that was good. Good chat today. Lots to cover. Maybe we'll do a deep dive on the MicroStrategy. I'd like to bring on someone who's kind of an expert in some of these emergent L1 stories that we just mentioned. We got to bring someone who's in the trenches, someone with less gray hair, who knows what's up with the kids. But that's it for this week's episode of DeFi Decoded. I'm Alex Tapscott. Until next week, have a good one. Take care.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.